Hello and welcome to More Than Just Trucks podcast. I'm your host, Ray Clark. And today with me, I have Terry Kerbe, DT&A Fleet Service Manager. Hello and welcome, Terry. How are you today?
Hey, Ray, I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing great.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're more than welcome. So this is pretty cool for me because, like I said, I think you and I have been on some JAD groups together and didn't really know each other. And then lo and behold, we end up in Indianapolis at one of a 10 workshop, another group of DT&A and us, and sit down and have a beer and start conversation and really have the same thoughts and stuff as far as like our backgrounds coming up through the ranks. And I'm going to title this podcast is old school versus new school kind of theory and thought, because I think that's kind of where you and I went with our conversation. But so let's start out. Give the listeners a little bit of your background. I mean, you kind of come up through the ranks too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I started in the business about 42 years ago. First job, I spent 8 hours a day in a steam pit, steaming engine components with a Cummins distributor. And worked my way up through the ranks, became a machinist, then a technician. I've been through the service writer role there. And then I moved into service management, spent 7 years in it, and parts management for 3 years. So after that, I went on to a Ford heavy truck store and was a service manager there for 6 years, and came on board with Daimler in 1998 as a fleet service manager.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it was cool that we both had some very similar backgrounds coming up through the ranks, wrenching to advisor to management. And I mean, you got, you're with our brand, that big oval on the front there. So I like that. Yeah. But So when we got chatting about, how things have changed from back when you and I, from a foreman's role and responsibility, even to a service manager's role. I mean, in the old days, I'm sure you remember the old days, every service manager had like a white shirt. I mean, that you knew that was your service manager. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you feel? I mean, what's your viewpoint of like old school versus new school? I mean, let's just stick on the old school perspective, right? What's your take on what you see an old school type shop scenario is?
Well, I think as we had chatted about before, old school, the service manager owned anything that went on wall to wall in the back end of the business, from personnel, payroll to processes. How are we doing repair wise? We were up with what was going on with the vehicles in the shop, which ones were problem children. We engaged in those with our shop foreman and our technicians, and tried to bring about repairs that happened quickly and in a fair amount of money or cost to the customer. Those days seem to have gone to the wayside somewhat. But, we were responsible for making sure we were bringing people into the business. Hey, let's talk about tech shortages. It's no different today than it was back then. Exactly. Might be a little worse, right? Might be a little worse just because we've got so much penetration in the market now. We've saturated it, and it's a bit more of a struggle with getting technicians brought up to speed and able to help us out in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, so the old days really, the old saying for me is, are you working on the business or working in the business, especially as a manager?
Right.
And,
sure.
You look back and exactly the point is, I like how you put it, behind the walls, right? Behind the scenes, is that the old school view was that manager he's building relationships with customers, bringing more work in, personnel. I mean, making sure the training paths are done. And then your foreman, I mean, there's to me, that's one of the huge changes, right? The foreman he was in uniform every day, same as a technician. Typically it was your senior tech or one of your senior guys. and like helped everybody from soup to nuts, man. He if it was an engine issue, he could walk up and help you diagnose or do a repair in the engine. If it was electrical, he could do the same thing. Um,
Yeah, we kind of had. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it just seems like some things have changed. I mean,
Yeah. Back in those days, the shop foreman would roll his sleeves up if he recognized his key role was recognize when a technician is buried up to it, and he's no closer to figuring out within an hour or two what direction to go with a diagnosis or a repair. He would be the guy to roll his sleeves up, get in there with him, make sure we followed all the printed diagnostic procedures, make sure that the readings we've taken are correct, and then he had enough knowledge that he could think outside of the box and work on many of the systems to help bring resolve.
yeah,
For sure.
and typically in a dealership, he was one of your fully certified, not just your experienced guy, but one of your fully certified guys. And it's like, I mean, well, okay, so let's flip the page now, and we're halfway through the book, and we're into the new school view, right? So the new school view is, it seems like it's numbers and digits and I guess software platforms that you got to live and die in and stuff. I mean, the one major thing that I guess I saw change was, and I don't think it was just our industry, but was customer needs. I think customers in general have really, and again, I don't think it's just the transportation dealership industry. I mean, McDonald's, I always blame McDonald's because they made fast food very convenient to go and get a meal, right? I mean, literally you could walk in and within 5 minutes you were out the door with 2 or 3 meals for your family. And you couldn't do that from home. And now everybody's encouraged to, well, I want it now. How come I can't have it now? In our world, it just, you don't drive into a shop and get something diagnosed now. And man, it's so much has changed.
Oh, really, it has. And again, we can't discount what the flood of product has done out there and having the right number of people. But when you look at what a shop foreman did years ago, they weren't involved in conversations with customers. They weren't involved in putting together estimates for repairs. They were strictly involved in making sure that our technicians are following the right procedures, that they have the right processes going, and that we meet the customer's needs as quickly as possible. Back then, if you think about it, when customers made a truck order, they typically would order 1 or 2 trucks as spares, even the large fleets, because they know they're going to have down events, and they know that it may not be an event that's going to be handled quickly. So those days are gone. The customers are smarter. They're not doing that. And like you said, the customer's expectations today are, I need to roll in and out of the shop, period. In a couple hours, I want to be back up and running. Back then, we didn't have anything that we called EA like we do today, but it was normal to run your business when a guy called and said, hey, my fan's not running, or my fan's running all the time. Well, that's a quick diagnose. You'd sneak him in, diagnose it, have another guy swap out a fan stat, and off he goes. Today we have, in the new school environment, we have EA, which I'm a fan of it. Let's get real about that. I think it puts a focus on the dealer's need to address the customer's needs quickly. But so often the shop foreman gets involved in things outside of rolling his sleeves up, getting under the truck, doing a repair, helping a tech through it. Funny story. So I'm in a shop, one of our shops, and I'm talking with the shop foreman, and the tech comes up and he says, hey, I've completed the diagnostics. I don't have a clue what's going on here. And the shop foreman didn't even think twice, just looked at him and said, hey, pick up the phone, call the CAC, and make sure that you touch base with the DSM. And I looked at him and I said, really? In the old days, we didn't do that. We didn't reach out for help until we exhausted. First, we validated everything was done properly. And second, we exhausted all the knowledge that we had inside the shop to help correct the problem. So that's been a big change.
Yeah. Yeah, so a couple things really, and I was a little bit joking about blaming McDonald's. So if they're out there and they're McDonald's lovers, but it's just so customers' needs have changed because I myself, I look back and say, hey, look, I'm kind of no better than some of our customers. I mean, I know being on the other side of the fence, I know when I walk up to, a chainsaw shop or something, and I have my chainsaw in there or anything, right? I mean, I go to another different dealership, whether it's where I take my motorcycle from time to time or my own personal pickup truck from time to time. It's like, I know the same thing. I have high expectations. Like, why isn't it done yet? But,
right.
And back to your point where, they used to order a couple trucks extra because it was like, okay, in case one breaks down, I can drop a driver into another truck and I've got one sitting here. On a plus side of it, Terry, I think the manufacturers have done a better job of keeping the trucks. The maintenance for sure has lengthened, as you've seen. I mean, we got trucks going out there with fuel filter changes that have exceeded my mind concept of mileage before, same with oil changes, right? So,
Sure.
The OEMs are out there doing a better job with that. Now, I got people probably sitting in the background when they listen to it laughing, saying, well, my trucks broke down every other week. I get it that there's enough electronics going on that, people do see different, breakdowns and stuff like that, but they have done a better job to get that going. So,
yeah,
like you said, it's on top of that want and need sooner. Like you said, we got EAs now, which is an express assessment. I call it a truck triage, right? It's just like a hospital for trucks. It comes in, we should have it written up, be able to kind of do a pre-diagnostics on it and then diagnose it, get your estimate. And hey, what is it going to be? 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 hours, right? So,
right. At least give the customer an opportunity to plan his business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you look at old school versus new school, right, and the current work atmosphere, trucks have changed. People have changed. We're in, God knows how many different generational gaps since you and I were actually in the dealerships working, right? And you take that into consideration, and probably the technology, number one for me, is been huge, right? So now we've in Freightliner, we've got our Uptime Pro, we've got Service Tracker, we've got Virtual Technician, you got your own business software, whether it's Proceed, CarMax, whoever you use, Microsoft, you got Outlook, you got emails and everything else going on. That, I think this is where you and I went in that same page is how do you get a foreman? I mean, you literally have to have like new job roles, right? I mean, how else do you get around that? Because I don't know the last time, I don't want to say that it's been bad, but it's like when you walk through shops, usually that foreman feels like he's locked at a desk, right? He's trying to get just fill out, I need to get customer information in these notes.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They do spend a lot of time at the desk. And when you go in and you talk to them and the service managers as well today, they are pretty much bound to the desk looking at financials, looking at estimates, looking at making a call to a customer to get more information that we may not have asked for at service write-up, all the things other than hands on the vehicle and hands on the technician, working with that guy to help bring him up. So it's created a lot of challenges. And as you said, technology, these trucks are so smart today with so many different ECUs and the wiring schematics have probably tripled, over the years. So there is a lot going on and a lot to keep up with. So how do you manage that? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's important for a service manager to recognize, just as we did years ago, all right, what are our weaknesses? If we're not spending time identifying where we're weak and putting something in place to say, here's what we're going to do to correct this, even if it's, I'm just going to crawl before I walk, but start some kind of path that will better prepare them for the future. Because listen, it's not going to get any easier. We got electric vehicles coming. We've got alternative gas vehicles. It's going to get a lot more challenging here in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, autonomous trucks, right? I mean, wait till we see the trucks
Right.
roll in on their own power, no driver in the seat, and we're starting to get emails dropped through VT, virtual tech, and oh, by the way, it's we know what's wrong. I don't want to say we know what's wrong with it. We have the complaint in a sense written up for us already with the truck
Yeah.
coming in on its own. So, I mean, man,
I really, I really believe that if in some ways we looked at how do we take a step back, right?
yeah,
How do we take it back and say, okay, what worked for us years ago, taking out all the automation and the technology, but what worked well years ago? What worked well was the shop foreman was directly engaged in the customer, the truck, and the repair. They were in it to win it, right? Um, and if it got to a point where they were in trouble, then the service manager was the next stop. And service manager was out helping to guide repairs based on their vast technical knowledge. Now that's another point.
yeah,
Years
there's another
ago,
story. Yeah,
exactly. Years ago, your service manager was typically your most technical guy in the shop, typically, right? Um, Nowadays, a lot of service managers have very little, if any, service repair background. They are running the business by financial statements and by throughput numbers and all the other things that we have them engaged in. And the OEM obviously has some play in that, as well as the dealer ownership.
yeah,
They have desires of what they want their service managers to do, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. But I think that that we have a little bit lost sight of what's important for the service manager to ensure that not only that shop grows, it develops, meets customer needs, but is there for the long haul, prepping them for that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, you said it in the beginning of that. Just how do you take it back to the basics, right? We know that's the one thing that hasn't changed. We know what works. We've forgotten how it works, I think. And again, this is an industry statement. So
yeah,
yes, I work for a large company. We got 25 dealerships, as some of our listeners know. So, I've seen it from store with 56 technicians down to a store with 5 technicians and 4, so, but again, I think you really is, how do you take it back to the basics where okay, so the old saying, like you said, a little bit at a time, is you don't eat an elephant all in one bite. Take it one bite at a time. And, in our world, in Freightliner worlds, we live kind of by action plans with that elite support criteria,
sure.
mentality. And it's like, okay, so let's go back to the basics. And what kind of action plan, what do I need to do as a manager to get back to those basics? I need to put that foreman back in a uniform, back on the floor. And that's what he's doing, right? He's bouncing from job to job, or I should say bay to bay with the technicians. He's, making sure stuff is going. And, I think sometimes it's, well, he's got some free time. So what can I give him next? Because, free time isn't efficient, right? It's not productive.
Right.
There's no income to it. So all the way up to the point of where you've got that service manager now that is, and I don't know, let's say from his 20s to mid 30s, truly
Mm-hmm.
what is his background, right? In the repair side of it. Oh, well, he was a tech for 2 years or 3 years and then become a service advisor, or became a foreman and became a service advisor, became the service manager. And it's like, okay, so with 5 years in the business, and I'm not saying that you can't have a bad service manager with 5 years experience, because that's kind of the one thing that I look back at for guys like you and I. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
where do you put the value at the experience? Because I think the same thing, right? Industry aside, I don't care if it's IT, marketing, or what.
Right.
Experience really does pay off in the end on some things.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And so I've talked to several service managers. As you know, you just went through with us the helping to set up, bring about training for service advisors, we're going to move that into shop foreman and service management. But, talk to many of those guys, and they, the first thing they'll tell you when you ask them, what does a day look like in your life? Tell me about the day in your life. They never get out from behind the desk. They're looking at throughput reports, which I'm a fan of throughput. I think it's done some great things for our customers. But it's no different than what we used to do years ago with the work in process. If you kept a work in process within 5 to 7 days, your throughput was jamming and your financial statements were jamming. You didn't have to spend a lot of time crunching numbers. If you were out working in it to make sure everybody's doing their part and what they need to do, the numbers came, the throughput came, customers were happy.
Yeah. So I use this analogy towards myself as a service manager. I think I shared it with you one night, but it's like, I look at myself as a farmer, and whenever I start the statement out, everybody's like, what are you talking about? How does farming relate to a service manager? Right.
Sure.
So I just say that, well, as a farmer, I have equipment. I have to maintain that equipment. If I maintain the equipment, if I plant the crop, I do everything right, there are things out of your control, right? You can't help Mother Nature, rain, no rain, droughts, whatever it be, to take your crop out. But if you do everything that you can in the best of your knowledge as a farmer, minus those outliers that you don't have control of, you probably have a good crop at the end of the season, right? So my point is that as a manager, whether it's parts, service, sales, no matter what kind of manager, if you do everything correctly that as a manager that you can do, you should prosper month after month after month. And to your point, right, is you don't always have to live and die by a dock where you're trying to crunch numbers and trying to get ahead of it. Well, my numbers are dropping. Okay. You don't have to sit there and look at a document or a report to tell you that. If you're kind of, you can be just observative and look around and know what's going on in your shop. Listen, right? I think communication is huge.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. If you are out there in it, if you're spending time in it, it's pretty telling quickly what weaknesses we have. Why are we, you can see the number fluctuation just based on the behavior patterns in the shop, right?
Yep.
But if you're not out there, number one, you don't identify it, and or let's say correctly identify it. You can't come up with a solution if you don't identify the root cause right down to the barrel. I mean, so it's a huge difference working out in it and working on it.
So back in my day, when starting out as a service manager, I was always taught by the senior guys that if you could do a 50-50 split, 50% at your desk or in the office working on the business, and 50% kind of in the shop working in the business a little bit, you typically could keep moving forward and gain some ground.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's what
absolutely. And when you look at it today and you ask a service manager what kind of time they spend in the shop, and the answer is, I'm rarely out there. If you can just get them to move the needle and say, okay, I'm going to commit an hour a day, every day, to come into work and spend time in that shop when everything's hitting the fan, and just go look and see, lend a hand where I can, and get a better understanding from the technicians what their needs are, how do they need development? Because, when you talk about training, we offer all kinds of training. You're familiar with the ARC system. I mean, for a technician to be certified, it's a huge investment in their time and effort to get there. But is that person really, is the competency there for what areas we're giving them training in? Do we have the right fit for that guy, right? That's and you can't know that without seeing it. You certainly can't pick it up in a report other than maybe through efficiencies following that one guy. How frequently does he meet expected times for that type of repair?
Yep. Well, so that leads me into the coaching program. and a good, I guess, good people around you, right? To me, I've always
Right.
said it, that the manager or the team, it isn't all about the manager. It's the people around him that make that. It's not the manager himself. It is the people that work for him that makes him a good manager. So if you've got a really good team around you, I think you can shine as a manager. But you got to be able to have the confidence in those people to rely on them, just like what you're saying, right? You can't always be out there. But could you,
Right.
could you have your foreman and build its coaching program? I'm going to highly encourage everybody, and they're going to be like, "What do you mean a coaching program?" So
Now I got to do this.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
another thing, but so
Yeah.
I always said to my dad and growing up in his business is, he kind of always wanted to fix the old equipment and keep running the old equipment. I said, Dad, it takes money to make money. I said, man, we can't just keep spending weekends turning wrenches just to be able to run another week. So
Right.
when I talk about that, and I'm not telling companies to go out and expense more payrolls or anything, but man, I think you can do better with, and again, I'm a huge advocate of having a coach, because the old days we had farm boys, we had country boys, we had even city boys that had hot rods in their garages that nobody knew about and stuff, that were very mechanically inclined. I'm just, unfortunately, today's generations, again, I'll talk fast food or quick lubes and everything, right? How many
Mhm.
parents nowadays do their own oil changes?
Very few. Very
Right.
few.
I mean,
Yeah.
so how many kids are getting that, even hearing it or seeing it? How many are even going with their parents to go get a quick lube? Now, it's like, hey, mom, my car needs an oil change, and can you drop that off tomorrow for me? And it's like, so
Yeah.
you're chuckling because I'm right, huh?
Dead on it.
But
Yeah.
so you take the generation change. How do we combat that? Right? You got technology, you got people, you got customers, you got OEM, you got, you know, those are the outliers, right? That I'm talking about, that you can't always control as a manager. So how do you combat
Right.
that? I mean, how do we get there? I think, like, to your point though, is how do you get back to the basics? How do you bring the old school perspective back into play? Literally, is it literally draw the line and say, hey, look, I'm going to step back and I'm going to do X starting tomorrow. I'm going to spend 1 hour a day as a service manager out in my shop, and I'm going to start talking to my team, right?
Yeah.
And
So
then,
yeah, and many things are helpful along that lines. Monthly, hold meetings with the entire group and share technical service bulletins. A lot of people have gotten away from doing that kind of thing because everything's available online. The
right,
problem is we're not alerting the technicians. When you and I came up as a tech, uh, we spent our downtime reading technical service bulletins.
yep,
Most of the technicians out there today, if you ask them if they've looked at service bulletins or service solutions, they will tell you, no, I didn't think to do that. Well,
yep,
that's important, right? Because a lot of the things they face are there's repairs out there for already, and they could be moving ahead with getting that completed. But
yeah,
you made a comment earlier about the service manager and that it's not all about him; it's about the team. And so I was told early in my career, very early, that the, uh, if you want to be successful in this business or any business at all, as you said, you have to surround yourself with great people. But you can't always do that, right? So, what's your
right,
role as a service manager at that point? You're only going to be as good as those that you've allowed and helped to succeed. That's what I've always believed. So, I needed to play an active role in making sure that my tech succeeded, my shop foreman succeeded, and whether that was through training processes, personal one-on-one coaching. Gosh, we did all this years ago, right? We'd sit down twice a year before a performance review and say, hey, look, last time we talked, here's some things you were wanting to go do as a technician. Here's where you wanted to see your growth come. Here's what we've been doing. How's it going? Right? Try and keep up this with speed on where they are in that path.
yep,
I think that matters a lot, a whole lot.
yeah.
And I don't know that we're doing all that today. We sign them up for ARC. We say, you need to go do your training. And I don't know, we ever follow up, did they do it or not?
I think most of them, like you said, are so busy. It's you pull the
Yep.
report, you throw it on a communication board and hope they read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Exactly.
Getting back to the basics, like we've been talking about, just like you said about service bulletins, my service manager printed copies for every technicians. And first thing in the morning, when you walked in, he was already there, and service bulletins were on your workbench or on your toolbox when you came in the morning. And that's the first thing you did with your cup of coffee was go through those service bulletins. Then you pulled out your 6-inch binder, it seemed like, and you started putting it in the categories.
Yep. Back then we had given them all a binder. We had them tabbed for whichever component of the vehicle, broken out by, bulletin, by the numbers, and
by the group.
And they filed, and they filed them. And it's not that you expect them to remember everything about the bulletin, but when something comes in that a light bulb goes off and says, wait a minute,
exactly.
I read about this, right? Because none of us have the capacity to remember everything that's thrown at us every day, especially today.
Yep. So we've been talking about kind of what we think. What do you think the foreman advisors' views are? I mean, like I said, we've seen that we've got advisors, some straight out of high school, some straight out of tech schools or colleges, all the way to foremans, right? I mean, is it truly a generational thing that if you can get people to want to work nowadays seems to be the avenue that will train you, we'll get you there. What do you think they're thinking? I mean, are they from what I've seen across our company and talking with others is some of them is just that, right? Is they're there just to kind of sometimes collect a paycheck, and others want it heart and soul, and they put every effort forward into it. I mean, what have you been seeing out there in your dealership groups?
Well, so the same thing, today, service advisor seems to be one of the highest turnover places in the dealerships today. Finding somebody that has the customer skills, has enough technical understanding to know to ask the right questions at the time of service write-up, that's a challenge. That's a challenge for all of our dealers.
Yeah.
And there's many pieces to that. What makes that such a challenge? Well, years ago, even through DTNA, we had service advisor training, and we required everybody attended that was holding that position. Problem was you got a lack of participation in it. And at some point in time, if you're not scheduling classes, well, they're eliminated. They go away, right?
Yep.
And I think also that we've discovered that compensation for a service advisor in the truck market today, while it's much better than it was, probably still needs a little bit for those people to make that investment. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the desire, the heart. This is what I want to do. I'm in this. I know this is what I want, and I either want to stay doing this or I want to elevate through the company. That the heart, let's say, is not quite in it, I don't think, today like it was years ago.
Yeah.
And I believe some of that is that the technicians aren't made to feel like they are really a part of the business. We used to sit down and go through financial statements with the techs on a monthly basis, tell them how we did last month, show them what their numbers were in we didn't call it throughput, but in throughput, in efficiency, and in productivity. And we actually showed them via the statement what changes occurs in the financial statement if they're more efficient or more productive. We showed them how those changes took place in the numbers. We made them feel like they were a whole part of the business, and they understood when you say, hey, the target's 85% in the back shop for efficiency, now they understand what that means and what 2% change can bring you, right?
Yeah. You say that brings it back years ago. I had a general manager, and on a monthly basis, right after the end of the month, he would bring everybody, parts, sales, and service, all the techs, everybody into one bay. And he would have a 15-minute little conversation with all of us pretty much on how we did the last month. And he never singled out any good, any bad. He gave us both the pros and cons of every department. But to your point, and it's perfect because I myself remember that, right? So you look back and it's what stands out in all those good managers, right? And there's several things, but for me, this was one of them because to your point, it made me feel like I was part of that company. Like, holy cow, here's a general manager sharing financial numbers. And he's not just sitting down with just the service department and not letting parts knows what parts is doing and service is doing or sales. He's got the book wide open to all of us saying, hey guys, you know what? Good job last month. Or it was, hey guys, wasn't so good last month. Here's a number that we typically need to keep these doors open. Service, just whatever, parts did whatever. And our sales were down a little bit or our sales were up. So just like, again, to your point, it made everybody from a floor cleaner, a basic guy coming in, cleaning floors, dumping garbage, wanting to be a technician someday, to the senior technician, to the management group, feel like they were part of that whole team. It wasn't just like, well, I guess service got a butt chewing because, we didn't hit numbers or something, or geez, parts got the big pat on them. It was everything. So, again, old school, right? Back to the basics. It was, and the more and more we chat here, it's, one common denominator for me, and I said it, and I think I'll keep saying it probably till they put me in the grave, is communication.
Absolutely.
Communication.
And let's face it. Yeah. I mean, we focus on communicating with the customer, and we're trying to improve every facet of that because we're not the best at that either today, right? There's a lot of challenges in that. There's too much service advisors are doing. There's not a day goes by that I'm not chasing a truck that a customer's tried to get a status on from 2 weeks ago, right? And they just can't get a call back or whatever. But it's amazing to me how not only is that important, but the internal communication part, the making your employees feel like they're a part of the business as a whole, that is as important as anything. Because without that, like you said, they don't feel like a team. All they got is somebody banging on them saying, hey, you didn't make your numbers. Well, what's my numbers look like? What if I do this, and how can I improve that?
Yep.
If I gain 3% in efficiency, what does that do to the bottom line? How does that improve things? And it doesn't take long. Technicians, the one thing that hasn't changed about them, they strive to learn. They want to learn things. It's just, how do they go about it? They're not going to go reading a whole lot of stuff. It more needs to be here. I got to give it to them, hand it to them. We need to get back to that. I think they'll find that they get much more buy-in that way.
Yeah. Yep. And on that same note, right? I mean, like I said, I came from a wrench world, gearhead guy, Ohio diesel graduate, all the way up through and got into management. But now where I'm at in this role with the training side of it, man, like I've told multiple people, I feel like I've found my niche in life at a, early 50s. It's like, holy cow, how does this happen? But it's like learning that the needs for techs when they train, right, is just that, right? They don't give them a big PowerPoint, but it's hard not to, because the technology that they have to learn and understand, they've kind of got to see it on the board in front of them, but then go and feed it to them with the hands-on. Let them start digging into it and doing it that way. By no means in today's world should a technician, diesel tech especially, should they be looked at as or downplayed as I don't want to use the terminology dumb or anything like that, but I mean, there are some very sharp technicians, and everybody coming into this industry, when they get the more training they get, I mean, these guys have to know more things than some people can do in a day and multitask. I mean, they're looking at computers, as you know, and multitasking on a regen screen, figuring out math numbers and calculating pressures, voltages, and temperatures all in one shot. I mean, like I said, it's crazy because in the old days you were considered what? And again, I hate the terminology, but you're a grease monkey, right? You were just that guy that got busted up knuckles, dirty, grubby.
Had to take his clothes off at the door when he got home.
Yep. I can tell you that there were many a times taking my wife to dinner and somewhat feeling embarrassed because my hands were so cut up, stained and greased looking still. And it's, and in the beginning it was hard, I think, for my wife even at times, because she's like, did you wash your hands? I'm like, yeah, they're that's what they look like. And that's, it's kind of embedded in me, but it's like, I'd love to get that stigma away from people and stuff, but I know that's another subject and topic for the matter. But, you talked about training, and that's the one thing that I do. Like I said, I've really grabbed onto, and DTNA Freightliner has really done a lot of stuff. And that's, again, where you and I met up and talked about, from the service advisor training role now, and they've got, we're into another phase of that going forward and moving forward now, where we've got some foreman training and service management training working in the background. They've got the parts academy out there. So there are tools out there for everybody. So, man, again, communicate, because the training's out there. Ask questions, man, because if you don't know, that doesn't mean anything, but you don't know unless you ask. So
right. And this is the great thing about trainers like yourself. There's several of you guys across the country with the larger dealerships that are very well known out there in the industry that have a lot to offer. When you talk about how the training's delivered and PowerPoints and such, they are necessary, but you guys touch the product every day. Right? You're in it every day. You see what changes are coming about. You're probably engaged many cases in some difficult to diagnose vehicles that are in your shops time to time. Yep. And I think it's important because you guys are the face to how our technicians come away from that training. Did they learn something? Are they capable? You can identify that during the training classes, but more importantly, you're able to give them real life situations and, hey, here's what we've seen, here's what we've heard or had, and make these guys, give these guys more than just a book to read, and the answer lies in there somewhere. I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Our company trainers and staff quality is definitely on the forefront. It's like, we're not going to open their head up and just dump as much stuff down as we can. These guys have done a great job with wanting to push the quality, like keep our class sizes down. And again, DTNA has some requirements on that side of it, but we've got our own program classes and stuff. And we max it at a 10 count person, but at 10 count, we still have a couple instructors at times where it's not that big college tech school feel where it's like 20, 30 students to one tech, and we're going to shove you out the door in a year and a half, and we're going to say, oh, yep, you're certified. It's not going to work that way. So thanks for that, because like I said, it's definitely, I think, been Truck Country, Stoops, the McCoy Group mentality is quality really comes first for the employees on the training side of it. They've done a great job with trying to proceed and give nothing but that quality training back into their employees.
I kind of like this podcast setup thing, because we go all over the place, talk about a lot of different things, and it brings to light a lot of great opportunities. But when we circle back, I think we were talking about what do you think the foremen and advisors, how they view things, right? So the foremen that I talk to today are they're stuck with doing estimates. They're not out in it working with the technicians the way they should be. And the advisors are in that firefight every day, just being able to keep up with the workload of trucks coming in to get write-ups done. Anything beyond that, the additional calling, their additional opportunity to learn more about what functions they provide that are so important to the technician. They can't get there. So how do we get them there?
Yeah.
One little piece at a time.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
you
going to
say.
say, and communicate it. Like I said, I'll hammer that.
Right.
I'll hammer that home whenever I talk to anybody, man. Just communicate it. Yeah.
I think absolutely.
I think you're right, though. The foremen are feeling, the guys that are the senior foremen that have been there before a little bit are feeling that crunch of, man, I just want to get out there and I want to roll my sleeves back up, but I got to do this, and this, So it's not the perspective that they don't want to do it. I think they feel like maybe some managers, right? They feel like they're handcuffed to that computer sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, no, and again, I told you from the get-go, the podcast for me is very informal. Like I said, someday I'm going to have a nice video recorded, sit down, casual, cup of coffee, crack a cold one type scenario where I've got some guys like yourself in the industry, and we literally just talk nuts and bolts sometimes about whether it's service operations, it's repair shops, it's trucks going up and down the road all the way to God knows what. I mean, that's what I mean. To me, that's what I like to listen to, right? I don't want to hear something very scripted when I'm listening to stuff. I've never been a big reader. And again, same like most techs, right? We're not readers. You said it. I don't like to read a lot of stuff. So to me, when I read things, just like listening, if it sounds or feels scripted, I'm probably not. I'm going to dial it off. I'm going to turn it and go to the next page.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, Terry, thank you for your time today. Honestly, it's been great. And again, I know you've asked me to jump in and help with some JAD group type stuff, and I'm welcome to do that. And want to help keeping all of us in the industry wise, and guys like you moving that needle, kind of moving forward and stuff like this. Maybe we can get it out there, start from the basics again. And how do we change things? And again, Doug McCoy said something to me way back when I started on a Sunday phone call with a customer and a general manager. Before I hung up with him, just remember, Ray, the customers make our paychecks. And I have not forgotten that. So
yeah, absolutely.
And
we're
again,
starting the crawl before we walk thing with the new training. I think long term, that's going to bring a lot of dividends for the customer.
Start it out small, develop it correctly, instead of trying to throw it out there all at once, knowing what we got. I mean, guys like yourself in there that's been in the industry. You're on the OEM side of it now. So keep driving that bus for us.
Absolutely. We appreciate everything you're doing too.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's show of More Than Just Trucks and Terry and I's conversation of old school versus new school. And again, remember that communication is key. Get the right people to work around you and work, maybe take that 50-50 viewpoint and take a little piece of the pie at a time. And again, thanks everybody for listening to More Than Just Trucks podcast, sponsored by Truck Country Stoops. And keep in mind that we've got 25 locations across 5 states to cover any of your Freightliner and other truck needs. We're not just a branded Freightliner group dealership. We'll take anything through the door to help get you back on the road.